those under the Kraken banner have long learned that raiding and terror are close companions. Thus, the crew of House Greyjoy's warship Silence is composed entirely of mutes. War is not a quiet business, but the silenced men add an unnatural stillness to the battlefield. Even in death, they make no sound. Even disciplined troops find such men unnerving, though wearing only light armor, their honed great axes can sunder heavy plate with ease. Thanks for stopping by Big Top Gaming. My name's Brian, and in this video we're going to talk about the House Greyjoy Silenced Men that recently-ish released for A Song of Ice and Fire the Miniatures game. So the box includes 4 unique sculpts for the Silenced Men. There aren't any banners or attachments in here, so it's just a straightforward unit release. So for 7 points, we get a unit that is speed 5, has the melee attack Great Axe that hits on 3s or better, and has a 7/5/4 decay stat. They end up coming in with a 5+ defense save and a 5+ morale. Tied to the Great Axe is the ability Sundering, and then as most Greyjoy units, they have Pillage. So after completing a melee attack, if for each enemy rank that was destroyed, you get a Pillage token. They can have up to 2. The other ability that they have that ties in with their pillage is the Silence's Infamy. This unit suffers -1 wound from failing panic tests for each pillage token on this unit, and while in short range, enemies suffer -1 to morale test rolls for each pillage token on this unit. So up front we have a uniquely survivable unit. They have that really low armor save or defense save, but their morale stat's very high, and with Sundering and that 7/5/4 hitting on 3's attack stat, they should be able to reliably get their own pillage tokens without much influence from other sources of pillage that exist for the Greyjoys, and the Silence's Infamy ties into keeping them around as well. If they're losing wounds, which they likely will because 5+ defense save is not anything to write home about, having the ability to suffer -1 wound from panic tests could be, even if you do happen to fail a panic test at your 5+ morale, you're likely to only lose models if you only roll a 3 on that D3 if you've got all your pillage tokens, which I don't think it's going to take very long to get those on here. The 7/5/4 attack stat seems to be a pretty regular thing for like your average combat unit, and or maybe even a performing combat unit, we would say. I wouldn't say average, but the 3+ is nice. They're not going to be missing very often, especially when they're getting that charge off. So overall, I think the Silenced Men are pretty interesting. And the thing that I like the most about them is, outside of just being a really survivable in quotes and aggressive unit, is the -1 to morale test rolls for everyone in short range for each pillage token they have. I think that's probably a really big selling point for them, considering they also are fighty themselves. It's almost like they get pseudo vicious without having the keyword itself. So I want to start out with some of the attachments that I've been looking at to kind of manipulate the Silenced Men. And first off, I think I want to start with some of the... There's a lot of attachments that can do this, and I think some do it maybe better than others depending on what you're looking for, but I think any way you can get vicious on this unit is going to be really good for them. Since they have the -1 to morale while you're within short range of them, they kind of turn into like a pseudo corpse pile themselves, kind of walking around, and getting vicious on top of that means you could be getting -4 panic tests from this unit every single time they swing. So Vargo Hoat is one of the Vargo Hoat the Crippler, is an interesting one because he just packs them with a ton of abilities for 2 points. He just gives them base vicious, which is what I'm really looking for out of an attachment on these ones. But then getting sadistic mutilation, is another really good ability for them. This just reads that after a unit completes a melee attack, you can expend 1 weakened token from the defender, and if you do, destroy 1 infantry attachment from that unit. Now I know some folks might be staying away from attachments because of Expert Duelist, and in Greyjoys, if you're using Vargo, you can essentially kind of get 2 of them between that and Carl. But Sadistic Mutilation is pretty nice if they do have an attachment that you're really not wanting to deal with, because Weaken Resolve is the other ability that he brings that just states that each time an enemy engaged with this unit fails a panic test, they become weakened. So your opponent should be failing a good number of panic tests with this unit as soon as they start getting the pillage going, and you can either use that weaken token to kind of add another layer of survivability to the Silenced Men, since they do need it, and also, if you're running into those attachments, you can just kind of take them off with Vargo. There are some other really... This is another ability that appears in a lot of different places. I mean, like, to rewind a little bit, you could also get Vicious from Dagmar Cleftjaw. Like, the first thing that he gives them when they get hit is Vicious. Now, the next one is Sundering, so you're spending 1 point to kind of forget about that Sundering ability, but then being able to roll your highest attack die value and reroll. I'm pretty sure that's what his final one is to reroll. Yeah, highest attack die value and reroll. It's a nice ability to make sure that you're... I think for the 1 point investment of Dagmar, it's not really that bad for you to miss out on Sundering, because you're going to be doing so much work between having innate Sundering and Vicious that your opponent will have to deal with you and have to give you that first battle scar, and eventually you'll get to that third one. So I think it's not the worst thing to leave one of the abilities that Dagmar brings to this unit home if what you're really wanting to get out of here is Vicious. So now to get back to my... the statement I was making earlier, there are several ways to get this ability onto a unit, and that's just the Fueled by Slaughter ability. So if we take a look at someone like the Warsworn for 1 point, he just... Fueled by Slaughter modifies your melee attack and just says that after this unit completes a melee attack, if the defender suffered any wounds, this unit restores 1 wound plus 1 additional wound for each of the defender's destroyed ranks. So Fueled by Slaughter isn't something that you need to fish for with this unit, but you will be likely swooping at least a rank every time they swing. They throw a lot of dice when they're on full, a decent amount of dice when they're not. They hit accurately on 3s. They have that Sundering to go with, and then you're going to be, as you kick these pillage tokens up, you'll be modifying your opponent's morale lower and lower and lower. And just being able to refuel some wounds that you might have lost while taking some damage is definitely beneficial. But I'm not saying that I want to put the Warsworn on here, that I want to fish for just Fueled by Slaughter. I don't think that's really the greatest use of the attachment on this unit. I'd be looking more towards something like Ramsay Snow. And for 2 points, he gives them the affiliation for House Bolton, and then he gives them the Fueled by Slaughter ability. But then he also has Intimidating Presence, which is another really interesting modifier to have on this unit. So by putting Ramsay on the unit, you don't get access to Vicious, but you do get enemies engaged with this unit suffer -1 to morale test rolls and +1 wound from failing panic tests. So it's a little bit of a negotiation, I guess, or a trade-off, right? You're missing out on the -2 from Vicious, but you're getting -1 to the morale test roll anyways, and you're getting +1 wound from failing panic tests. So I think that aggressively, Ramsay might be a better choice than trying to go for Vicious on the unit, because you'll get that, Intimidating Presence will get you what you want, or it'll help you kill more things, get more pillage tokens on the unit, and just overall do a lot of work for you. In addition, you've got Theon, who now you can take for free after the 2022-ish update. I can't remember if they called it the 22 or the 21 update, but at any rate, Theon is now free again, so he just gives the order Set an Example. At the start of any turn, you can target all enemies within short range. They become panicked, and then you roll a die, and then on a 6, you destroy Theon. So getting panic on your opponent's models all within short range means that they're all going to be getting that minus, or that debuff on their morale from the Silenced Men. And if there's anything that this unit particularly likes, it's having a big bubble of panic tokens all over. So with this unit having an ability that broadcasts outside of its own direct influence, like this, their Silence's infamy doesn't say enemies engaged with this unit suffer -1. It's within short range. So they've got a bubble of debuff that they bring with them. And I do like to kind of get units that kind of have this like buddy cop feel almost, where we can kind of double team and collapse sides. So what I like to bring along with my Silenced Men is at least one unit that has Vicious somehow. Oftentimes I'm bringing multiple, but for the one that I want to talk about here is going to be the House Harlaw Reapers for 6 points. They've got the same attack stat with their Reaper's Fervor, 3+ to hit, 754, same speed, same defense save, a little bit worse morale, but not a big deal. So for their Reaper's Fervor, they get Vicious just innately, so it plays into the -1 bubble that comes with the Silenced Men. And then they also state when an enemy fails a panic test from this attack, which they'll likely do if your things are going your way, for each pillage token on this unit, choose one. The same effect may be chosen multiple times. That enemy suffers +1 wound, or this unit restores +1 wound. So this is just another really aggressive way to utilize panic with the silenced men running around. Now, if we go back to someone like Ramsey and putting them on this unit, not only are we getting vicious, but now we've got intimidating presence for -1 and the +1 wound for failing a panic test. And then you can also, as you're getting pillage tokens, make them suffer more wounds. So they could be losing D3 +3 models every time you swing and they fail a panic test. And when you factor in the -2 bubble that you could be getting from the silenced men, you're looking at a -5 panic test. And I don't think there's a single model in the game that's extremely comfortable taking a panic test like that when they're going to be suffering D3 +3 wounds. It's quite brutal, and having these Reapers run around with the silenced men is definitely the duo you want to be kind of packing together. Another unit synergy I want to talk about is the synergies they can get with particular NCUs. And this one is kind of like a no-brainer. There's no real specific synergy here other than just stating how kind of ridiculously efficient it can be. And that's going to be Baron Blacktide, Blind Baron. He has the ability Zeal of the Drowned God, and it says Baron may only influence Greyjoy units, and he has influence when this unit claims his own, blah, blah, blah. But while influencing a friendly unit, that unit only suffers 1 wound for every 2 unblocked hits from any attack or effect. And then you remove Baron's influence if that unit fails a panic test. So right up front, very unlikely that not likely for this unit to fail a panic test because they have that 5+ morale stat. But with them having a 5+ defense save, they're not extremely survivable. So by putting Baron Blacktide in, influencing the silenced men, you are essentially turning them into giants almost, where they're like, for every 2, you're only taking 1, and that's going to help keep them around a lot longer. I think for 5 points, Baron Blacktide makes it into a lot of Greyjoy lists because typically they aren't the most survivable things in the world, to the point where I think you even are probably taking Jaqen H'ghar just so you can copy this influence ability and get that on 2 units at the same time. It's 10 points in NCUs, but it's 10 points to keep the rest of your army alive, and I think that's extremely beneficial. I think you're very unlikely to see a Greyjoy list without Baron Blacktide in it, or at least having been considered for the role. Another NCU that's more tricksy than good, I think, is going to be Christopher Botley, Lord of Lord Sport. So he has the ability Ironborn Diplomat, and it states that once per game at the start of the round you can select 1 tactic zone. If you do, that zone may not be claimed this round. Also, once per game when an enemy NCU activates, you can select 2 tactic zones, and if the NCU claims either zone this activation, target 1 enemy combat unit, and it becomes panicked and vulnerable. So the thing about Christopher that I like is that there are some of the zones that can kind of undo or unravel some of the damage that the silenced men have done, or if your opponent's trying to wipe them out quickly, they could get that top of the turn and take the swords to try and fight them out. Stopping the swords for the first turn, I think, is pretty powerful. Or stopping swords the turn you need it to be stopped when your opponent has the top of the round is extremely important. It can help keep some of these units around and ends up taking an activation off the table for them. It removes it for you as well, but you weren't going to be taking that zone anyways, so it's not that big of a deal. It does kind of mess with some of the Greyjoy cards, but some of them it might play into. But the once per game selecting 2 tactic zones, that stops your opponent from having to make the choice of, like, if they wanted to take the coin to heal or combat zone to do something. If they do that, they're going to get panicked and vulnerable, and those are both abilities that the silenced men really enjoy because they hit really hard and have good modifiers for their attacks, and then the panic is going to be really rough from them. So if your opponent gets lucky and rolls high on their morale test, then you can go ahead and kind of unravel that. Wendemir's another great one because he just lets them shift 3 inches, and that will cause you to get them in combat quicker, which they really want to do. So like I said, there are better options for NCUs, but Christopher Botley, I think, can really do some neat things and disrupt your opponent quite a bit. So if you are building more of a disruption style list, I think that Christopher definitely has has a place in there. But if you are building something a little more aggressive, especially if you're going to an event where there might be like a Fire and Blood event or a Fire and Blood round, Wendemere might be one you want to be looking at instead. Transitioning over to the commanders, this is one that I've been playing a bit recently myself, and the reason why I didn't mention Roose Bolton as an NCU, which works really well with what the Silenced Men are wanting to do, the reason why I didn't put him up there is because he's typically the commander that I'm reaching for when I want to try and center around Silenced Men or Panic. So for a free attachment, he gives the order Spread Fear. When an enemy engaged with this unit fails a panic test, you target one other enemy unit within long range of this unit, and they suffer a panic test with -1 to their roll for each remaining rank on the unit, and on a failure, they suffer +1 wound on top of that. And then he does give them the affiliation House Bolton, and then gives them Intimidating Presence, which we talked about with Ramsey, where they suffer -1, or enemies engaged suffer -1 to morale test rolls and +1 from failing panic tests. So Roose Bolton, he doesn't let them get the vicious ability by going on there, so it's not great for that. But -3 to morale test rolls just for being within short range of the engaged with them having panic tokens is a big deal. And then being able to echo out extra panic tests, the -1 to the roll for each remaining rank is brutal, especially when we think about how Baron keeps these guys around quite a bit. And just as a point of clarification for those that don't keep up with the FAQs all that much, affiliation House Bolton does not replace the affiliation House Greyjoy that comes with the Silenced Men unit, so they get the best of both worlds. They'll be affected by Roose's cards, and they will also be affected by any House Greyjoy specific cards or abilities, so Baron can keep these guys around quite a bit. So they should be having quite a few ranks left, and when you factor in the minus to panic tests from Spread Fear, if you pick a unit that's within short range, then they get the minus from Silence's Infamy, and if they happen to be engaged with something else with Intimidating Presence, you're looking at a -6 morale test or a panic test, and they also are going to be suffering +1 wound for that. And with them being engaged with an Intimidating Presence unit, they would be suffering an extra wound from that as well. So it can get pretty bonkers over here with Roose Bolton leading the Silenced Men around. So the first card we see that Roose Bolton brings to modify the Greyjoy Tactics deck is going to be Whispered Threats. This triggers when an enemy NCU activates. If that NCU claims a zone this turn, after resolving that zone's effect, target one enemy combat unit, they become vulnerable, and then you target one enemy combat unit and they become panicked. So often in this game, your opponent's wanting to get their NCUs going first. They want to be able to get that combat zone, fish for some tactics cards if they don't like their hand and think they have an answer to the situation buried somewhere else, or they're retreating out of combat, getting closer into combat. There's a ton of reasons why people want to have their NCUs go early. And by doing so, if they're, smacking your Silenced Men or something like that with the swords, they're going to be punished horribly for it because, again, mentioning Christopher Botley, you're combining Panicked and Vulnerable, and you can put those on the same unit, and both of those are the best tokens for the Silenced Men to be taking advantage of. So I think Whispered Threats is just such a brutal card because you're 100% going to get it activated every single time you want. Whenever you want it to happen, your opponent will do that for you. And it might cause them, after they get the first zap of this, to maybe think twice about activating their NCUs, kind of like as the mechanical process of how some people choose to use their NCUs. They might, delay that a little bit after getting these tokens put on them and you having Christopher on deck, to where even if you don't have the card, you have the option to make that happen for them anyways, or make it it's likely to happen, I guess. So Whispered Threats, really great card for Silenced Men. The next one is Fear Keeps a Man Alive. This triggers when an enemy fails a panic test. You target any number of friendly House Bolton units within long range, and then for each wound caused by this panic test, restore that many wounds total across these units. So this card, it looks like a weird, not as great version of Fealty to the Crown, but if you kind of rewind back and reflect on what I had said earlier about Intimidating Presence and the House Harlaw Reapers, D3+3 is a lot of it's a lot of wounds. I almost said some not nice words, but it can get pretty bonkers. So if your opponent happens to roll really high on that morale test and fails as bad as they do, or if they fail the morale test and roll the highest amount on the D3, you can easily be throwing out tons of wounds back into your units, and it just kind of keeps that grind going. I know, like, I've stated on several occasions that I feel like Greyjoy is a tempo. They want a tempo army. They want to control the speed and the pace of the game. And I think that Fear Keeps a Man Alive helps them move towards that. Same thing with the vulnerable token. They're still kind of steamrolling forward and building up this momentum of a lot of damage happening as the game gets longer. And I think this it really goes into, because like they're going to be failing panic tests. If you play a list that's built around this mechanic, there is your opponent will fail. I don't care if they're bringing dragons. They're going to fail a panic test one way or sooner or later with how many buffs you've got putting on them. Maybe a full dragon or full 3 dragon list might not be so easy to do because pillage is hard to get off of them. But, you know, I'm just maybe speaking in extremes. But Fear Keeps a Man Alive, real dang good card. The last one he brings is A Flayed Man Has No Secrets. This triggers when a unit is targeted by an ability or tactics card. You may expend 1 condition token off or from an enemy in long range of that unit, and if you do, cancel this effect cancel the effect of that ability or tactics card. So oftentimes, you know, your opponents want to play their tactics cards. That's just a big part of this game. They end up, you know, we talk about this in every single video that I make, whether it's talking about a unit or talking about a commander. The cards manipulate the game so much to where you're building your army around the way some of these cards work, and being able to just spend a condition token off of anyone in long range, because it doesn't state that you have to spend a condition token from the unit that's being targeted. You just get to use, you know, wherever you've decided to slap tokens, in which we have learned we have really no problems with between Roose, Tristfer, and Tactic Zones. But this makes it so that if your opponent plays something where they're going to try and heal or get some kind of really good card that helps modify their morale a little bit, like they only lose 1 wound from failing panic tests or something like that, this will make it so you can stop that and have a say in controlling the game. It's another, you know, control doesn't work into the tempo like, you know, bucket as easily or as seamlessly, but I think that this particular card, in combination with how Greyjoys are wanting to keep the pace of the game moving in the way they want it to move, this particular card can make it so that you can disrupt your opponent's fight back to try and slow the tempo down back into, you know, a manageable way of dealing with all these wounds and aggression that you're kind of putting out. So I am a real big fan of what this card does for the Greyjoy army. So overall, I do think that the Roose Bolton led Greyjoy list is probably one of the most brutal panic tests or panic driven lists you can play, to the point where I think that there could be an adjustment to probably more so the Silenced Men, because I think they're the ones who really turn this on. You know, as an example, the list that I play, it really is just like Roose Bolton in a unit of Silenced Men, and then Ramsay in a unit of Harlaw Reapers, and then it's just like a father-son duo running around just like slapping people. And you've got access to a lot of different things that, like, I mean, Asha Greyjoy in Asha 1, I'll say, in a unit of House Bolton Blackguard, like, the morale buff for them for Inspiring Presence isn't the biggest deal in the world, but like being able to just have Warcry on tap and then having the Horrific Visage be as brutal as it is with Silenced Men, like you can literally make a brick of Blackguard, Silenced Men, Reapers, and it's just devastating. Your opponent just, it's no matter what, it's just going to be hard for them to deal with. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Silenced Men turn into having -2 for units they're engaged with instead of just being a giant corpse pile. But who knows, maybe this is mitigatable somehow. But I feel like when I play this list, oftentimes I feel like I'm playing an extremely lethal list, which I think the game wanted to try and get away from a little bit. So instead of instead of kind of hanging my hat on the fact that this list is almost unfairly brutal, I think that the Silenced Men in general are a really great unit to be adding into the Greyjoy faction. I didn't get to talk too much about the extra commanders that I really like for this because of how many other synergies they have going with them and explaining how the panic tests really are quite dysfunctional with this unit on the table. But Euron Greyjoy is another really great commander for this particular unit. I think that honestly, most of my commanders that I've been seeing in Greyjoys lately, for my builds at least, are typically having the commanders sit in a Silenced Men unit because they are so damaging and they're like hidden survivable with Baron running around with them. Thanks for sticking around with me to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, just hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I think it just kind of kicks me up in the search results, so helps us out, helps other people out looking for videos like this. And let me know in the comments below what you think about the Silenced Men, and do you really feel like this type of Roose Bolton-ish list? I mean, you could do it with a lot of different commanders. Ramsay has some game with it too. But let me know if you think that this type of panic-driven list is something that you would like to see changed in the game, or if you feel like it's okay to have something that drives home panic tests like this because it is a mechanic in the game that we'd all like to utilize. Like, I think panic should be something that you could focus in on and still have it be effective and brutal, but I don't know if we've maybe pushed that needle a little too far over the acceptable limit with this. Looking forward to hearing what you all have to say, and I look forward to making the next one for you.